Hey guys, I am back from vacation, but I am really busy just kind of settling back in and also trying to get the studio ready for the new show that I'm going to be launching here in the next couple of weeks. And I've been intending to upload some videos for you guys. There's a lot to talk about. One thing in particular is what is going on in Israel and between Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians in East Jerusalem and all of the chaos that's going on there right now. So I'm going to actually be talking more in depth about that tomorrow. But for tonight, I figured I would re-upload this segment that I recorded when I came back from the West Bank. Some of you know that I went and visited the West Bank, toured around alongside Palestinians to see what the occupation was like firsthand from their viewpoint, from their lived experiences, traveling alongside of them inside the West Bank and seeing the refugee camps and seeing just kind of going around and seeing what life is like under occupation. And it was an amazing trip. I had every emotion with the trip, from amazed and, just to see these places that we've read about in history and religion for a long time, to shock and awe with some of the stuff how people treat each other in this world, and the oppression and just the fear. And so there was just a lot of emotion when I came back from that trip. So I recorded this segment. It's called What I Saw in the West Bank, and I figured tonight I would re-air that for you. So here it is. And tomorrow I will be uploading more content for you regarding the current situation at hand. But I'm just kind of gathering more details and getting more stuff together for you guys. So until then, watch this, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me. I am back from the West Bank, and I've decided to do this as a live stream because I'm going to be honest with you. I tried filming this 6 or 7 times, and I've got a problem with my equipment where it shuts down at 30 minutes. And so so this is going to be a long one potentially because I have a lot to say. And I will be showing you guys footage from the West Bank, things that I saw at another time. But right now, I just kind of want to give you a general overview of what I saw and how I felt, and what I witnessed over there. And then throughout time, in the next, as time goes on, so maybe once a week, I'll roll out more of a specific segment about the various things that I saw while I was over there, because it's very, like I said, I tried filming this a few times, and I tried putting it all into one 30-minute thing, and it was just absolutely impossible, because talking about, for example, the water situation alone is like its own 20-minute segment, if not longer. So I went to the West Bank. That's where I went. I was a delegate in a group. I was invited by the American Federation of Ramallah, Palestine. They invited me a couple of months ago, so this was a planned trip. There were 8 of us in this group. There were priests, there were medical professionals, there were journalists, there were educators, and every day was jam-packed. So we started at 8 o'clock in the morning, got on a bus, and we didn't get back to the hotel until 9, 10 o'clock at night sometimes. We stayed in Ramallah for the most part. We did have one night in Jerusalem, and then we spent the rest of the time in Ramallah. So we were in the West Bank, staying in the West Bank, basing ourselves there. Our guides were Palestinian. Our group was led by Palestinians from a variety of the regions. We had some Palestinians that were born and raised in the Israel side. We had Palestinians that were from the West Bank. We had Jerusalemites with us, and I'll go into the identification system probably in another video, but I'll touch on it here as well. I got back about almost a week ago, but for one, I was jet lagged. 2, I've been busy moving into a new studio, and trying to do that while being jet lagged. And 3, I really wanted to take the time to listen to my many Jewish friends and my many Israeli viewers to hear their side of the story. I know many of them were concerned because I'd been posting some things on Facebook, on my personal Facebook, and also on Instagram. And many were concerned about what I was seeing, the narrative that I might come back with. They felt like maybe I was being propagandized by the Palestinians, and they wanted to share their side of the story. So I wanted to give the opportunity to listen. And I spoke to many, many of my Jewish friends who I hold very dear in my heart. I have many Jewish friends. I have many Israeli viewers that I adore, and I wanted to really listen to them and hear them out. Before this, I had no Palestinian friends, really. I don't think I now have a few, but before this trip, I don't think I had any Palestinian friends. So I have many, many Jewish friends. So I don't have an agenda that would be for any reason pro-Palestine. I wouldn't, I'm not Palestinian. Like I said, I have Palestinian friends now, but I didn't before this trip. I have more Jewish friends than I do Palestinian friends. So I don't have any skin in the game. But I am an American, and I am a tax-paying American, and our tax dollars are largely funding, if not fully funding, the Israeli army, the Israeli military. So I struggled with what I was going to say about what I saw, because I know that what I'm going to say is going to upset a lot of people. And like I said, I have a lot of Jewish friends, and I have a lot of Israeli viewers. And I really had to process everything that I saw. When I came back, I had to, while I was there, there was so much to see. I was just kind of taking it all in. And it took coming home and sitting alone in my room and thinking and kind of going through my footage and thinking and feeling for me to really process everything and for it to really hit me. First, half of the trip, each day, we started at, like I said, 8 o'clock in the morning and finished at 9, 10 o'clock at night. Half of the trip was on amazing cultural experiences. It was a cultural exchange mission. They exposed us to just Palestinian life. A lot of musical performances. We went and saw the holy sites. We went to mosques. We went to holy site, Christian sites like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Church of the Nativity. By the way, the majority, the Palestinian organization that I was traveling with, I believe they're mostly Christian. So most of the Palestinians I was with were Christian Palestinians, not Muslim Palestinians. There was a couple of Muslims with us, but majority were either Greek Orthodox or Catholic. So we went and visited, the Christian sites. We went and visited the Muslim sites, and we went and saw the Jewish sites, like the Wailing Wall, and it was all just such an amazing experience going and seeing the Holy Land and this place that is so special to 3 of the main religions in the world. We also went and did fun things like rode camels and floated in the Dead Sea, and which was a crazy experience. The Dead Sea, I mean, it's like you just sit down and you start floating. It's really amazing. And riding a camel is not that easy. We ate so much food. The Palestinian people will feed you and feed you and feed you and feed you and feed you. I ate more hummus than I could ever imagine in my life, and more falafel and amazing salads. It was just such a wonderful experience. The Palestinian people were extremely warm, extremely kind, extremely welcoming. Just an overall wonderful experience. I definitely encourage you to go. A lot of people I know said, "Oh my gosh, be safe." There is nothing to fear. You should go to the West Bank, and well, there are things to fear. It's not 100% safe. Of course, it's not like being here in the United States. But I do encourage you to go. And if you're going to go to the Holy Land and to see the holy sites for whichever religion you are, stay in Palestine. Amongst the Palestinian people, get a Palestinian guide. And I might be doing a blog post that kind of gives you specifics on where you should stay and which guides you should hire and hotels and restaurants you should eat at and things like that. But it is a wonderful place to go. It's a great place to base yourself out of. And mainly because when you base yourself with Palestinians on the Palestinian side, you really get a better picture of what is going on. If you stay on the Israeli side, it's going to be very much like America. When we went over to Tel Aviv, to that area, it was very much like Los Angeles. It was very Western. The people were dressed very Western. The attitudes are very Western over on the Israeli side. Whereas on the West Bank, they're very conservative people, so you do want to cover up. They are, they're so it's a more conservative group, of course, but just a warm and welcoming and wonderful group. Now, before I say what I'm going to say about what I saw, I do want to acknowledge that the Israelis have legitimate security concerns. They do. They are in a region of the world where radical Islam is all around them, and there is a very, radical Islamic groups are a problem, and they're such a big problem that they're able to raise entire armies, and they're able to take over entire regions. So it is serious. It's not like your average Christian extremist in the United States that goes and blows up an abortion clinic. That's bad. But when we're talking about these Islamic groups, they're able to raise entire armies and take over entire regions and become governments. So it is a situation that they have to be very alert to, and they have to constantly be diligent about their security. And I'm not going to take that away from them. They absolutely need to be hyper diligent, much more so than we need to be here in the United States by a long shot. We're 7,000 miles away from all of this, and it's right for them in their backyard. Now, granted, they kind of inserted themselves into that backyard. But history is history. They're there now. And now that they're there, I do agree that Israel has the right to exist. I will say, and I don't want to get into the geopolitics too much in this video, because I could get into that into another video. But after being there and after seeing what I saw, I am more firmly in favor somehow of a two-state solution. A one-state democratic solution is not a solution at all. And in fact, I think it's negligent to call for it, because all you're going to do is continue to antagonize the Israelis, and they're going to continue their human rights abuses. And make no mistake, they are committing some serious human rights abuses. So the Israeli perspective is that Palestinians are aggressive and violent, and that they're raised to be violent, that they're taught this in their homes, that they're taught this in their schools, that they're taught this in their churches. And that's the side of the story I got from all of the Israelis I spoke to this whole week, was that Palestinians are violent. That is not the experience I had. Palestinians were warm and wonderful, and not at all. I mean, of course, there are violent people. There are, and the thing to remember is that there's two types of violence that are going on there, right? And they've got to be distinguished from one another. The first type of violence is, yes, radical Islamic groups. They've got this idea of creating a caliphate and controlling the world under Sharia law. Okay, that's an ideologue. That's somebody who's an extremist or radical. Those people exist. But there's another type of person who's rising up in Palestine, and that is a resistor. That is somebody who is resisting the occupation. That is somebody who is resisting their land being stolen from them. That is somebody who is resisting the eradication of their people. And that needs to be separated from the two. There's two types of uprisings going on. One is wanting to create an Islamic caliphate, and one is just wanting to fight for against this occupation and oppression. But to the Israelis, it seems like it's all one and the same. And not only is it all one and the same, but then they think that all Palestinians are like this, when it's just not true. There's millions of Palestinians, and the vast majority of them are peaceful, and they're just living under total oppression. So what I think has happened is that the Israelis have become so, there has been a lot of terrorism committed against them. They've committed acts of terrorism against the Palestinians. It's very tit for tat when it comes to the terrorism. And it is terrible, the things that have happened. Babies being burned alive and children being hung. And I mean, it's awful. It's awful what the two sides have done to one another in this fight. But only one group is in power, and that is the Israelis. They are the ones in power, and they're the ones who are able to exert oppression and human rights abuses against the Palestinians. The Palestinians are not in power. They're not able to turn around and commit the same human rights abuses and the same oppression against the Israelis. They're able to commit the same acts of terror that the Israelis commit on them. They're committing these acts of terror on each other. But one side is committing human rights abuses. And there is no excuse for the human rights abuses that I witnessed over there. There's absolutely no excuse for it. And I struggled with this week because what I saw to me was so terrible. The oppression and the abuse that I saw was so horrible that I couldn't believe one group could do this to another group. It's just something that's like beyond my mind. And it's something specifically beyond my mind when I think about who's doing it, because I think of these, the Jewish people and what they went through. And how could they then turn around and do something that looks very similar to another group of people? Of course, it's not nearly as extreme. I understand that what the Jewish people went through with the Holocaust was horrible. It was absolutely horrendous. And the Palestinian people even said that to me. They were like, what they went through was horrible. We're not going through anything nearly that bad. And they're quick to say that. The Palestinian people know they're being oppressed. And they say, we're being oppressed and we've got these, things going on, but they had it worse. It reminded me of a grown man who's beating his child. He's beating his kid and he's an abusive person. And he says to his kid, well, you don't have it that bad because my dad beat me and he used brass knuckles. So it's very much like that. The abused has become the abuser. And I can't even express in words what I saw because it's not believable. Honestly, it isn't believable. I didn't believe it until I saw it for myself. I didn't believe that homes were truly being stolen. I thought, no, there's got to be, a reason for that, or home demolitions. Oh, there's got to be a reason for that, or maybe that's not. How real is that? The identification system that all the Palestinians are being forced to live under, they're being forced to all identify themselves as Arab. They have to carry around these papers at all times. At all times, they must carry these papers. And if they don't carry these papers and they don't have them and they're stopped by the military, I don't even know what would happen to them. Anything could happen to them, from being obviously jailed, beaten, and potentially killed. I don't know what would happen to them, but it wouldn't be good. So they have to carry these papers around that identify them as Arab. Even if they're on the Israeli side and they're born in Israel and they're Israeli citizens, their papers, their passport still has a number that indicates them as an Arab Israeli. And on the Palestinian side, they require them to carry around these papers. And these papers limit their freedom of movement and limit their family unification. So it's very complicated. I'll do my best to try to explain it. But basically, there's a variety of different IDs you could end up with if you're Palestinian. And it's all based on where you're born, for the most part. So if you're born in the West Bank, you are not allowed to travel to Jerusalem or anywhere in Israel. You have no freedom of movement to move into those areas. If you're born in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, you can move anywhere around that you want. You can move into the West Bank. You can go into Jerusalem. You can go into Israel, but you're not a citizen of any nation. You're stateless. So you've got basically a green card for a country you were born in an area where your family has been in for hundreds of years. You basically have a green card that the Israelis can revoke at any time. And then I don't know what happens to you. You become a refugee. And what happens is, if you're born in Jerusalem and you fall in love with somebody from Ramallah, for example, you're kind of doomed, because the person, and these cities are near each other. They're not far. You're talking 30, 45 minutes. So if you're living, if you fall in love with somebody from Ramallah, they can't even visit you in Jerusalem. They're not allowed to go in. Their papers don't allow them in. You're allowed to go see them in Ramallah, but you can't move to Ramallah, because if you move to Ramallah, then the Israelis will revoke your Jerusalem citizenship, and you'll become like the person in Ramallah, where you can't even travel to Jerusalem. And you could imagine how much of a complication that is if you have parents who are aging and living in Jerusalem, and your wife or the woman you want to marry is in Ramallah. And what do? She can't live with you. You can't live with her. If you leave, you can't even visit your own parents. So they make it to where the life is very difficult. The movement is very difficult. And then when you do move around, you're met with military checkpoints. You're met with massive guns in your face at all times. The West Bank, a lot of people think, is controlled by Palestine. It is not. It is largely controlled by Israel. They've divided up the West Bank into areas. They've got areas, Zone A, B, and C. And Zone A is the urban city centers. Zone B is the suburban areas around the cities. And Zone C is everything in between. And the Israelis control C completely. They control all of Area C. So if you're a Palestinian in the West Bank and you're trying to travel from one Palestinian town to another Palestinian town, you're going to be met with military. You're going to be met with checkpoints. You're going to be met with, you better be holding your papers because, or else. Areas B are controlled by both Palestinians and Israelis. And then areas A, the urban centers, are controlled by Palestine for the most part, not fully, because Israel still controls all the water. Israel controls the electricity. Israel controls, your life, the imports and exports for businesses. We met with numerous businessmen who said that for them, and these were American, we met a lot of Americans who were born and raised in America, but they were Palestinian heritage and they tried to migrate back. They're not really allowed to migrate back. So they have to constantly renew their visas like every 3 months or something ridiculous. And they've been there for 20 years and they're constantly having to do this visa renewal thing in order to be there, because Israel doesn't really want anyone immigrating into Palestine. They're actually trying to get people, it's very obvious that they're trying to get everybody to leave. And that's ultimately the end goal, is to make your life so miserable that you just leave. So businessmen were telling us that they could order the same goods from the same company that an Israeli businessman was ordering from. The goods arrive at the same time from the same place. And the Israelis, the customs, border, whatever, will release the goods within 2 or 3 days to the Israeli business. But to the Palestinian business, which is maybe even an American Palestinian business, they'll hold on to the goods for 2 to 3 years. So they're hindering the business. They're hindering the freedom of movement. The water situation is one of the worst human rights abuses that I witnessed while over there. When you're driving along, you see all of these water tanks. And I'm going to do a special video just on the water and a special video just on the identification system. I'm going to be rolling out special videos on each of these, because like I said, trying to cover all of this in one video is impossible. And I want to show you the footage. I want to show you what I saw. So I'm going to do it in pieces. So one video is going to be about the water, and I'm going to be speaking and bringing onto the show an expert who was there from America, an American who was working on trying to treat the water in Palestine to try to clean it up. And they were met with sometimes gunfire, trying to measure water areas of water that they were needing to treat, and a variety of other things that they witnessed. And so, and what's going on with how the water is completely under Israeli control, and they're stealing water from Palestinians, selling it back to them for 7 times the price, and limiting the amount of water access they actually get. So when you're there, you see these water tanks on all of the Palestinian buildings. Every home, every building has a water tank on it. But the settlements, which there are 100 settlements, you see settlements everywhere. You drive along the roads in the West Bank and you see settlement after settlement after settlement, and you don't see any of these water tanks on these settlements. So the Palestinians have water tanks. Why is that? Well, because they only get running water 3 days a week. 3 days a week, they get running tap water. The other days a week, they have to rely on their reserve tanks. So when they have flowing tap water, they have to fill those tanks as much as they can, because that's their only water source for the other 4 days a week. Meanwhile, the Israeli settlements, which are just right down the street, have fresh flowing water 24/7. Not only that, but they have lush yards that they're watering. They've got pools, swimming pools, lush green grass. When you cross the Israeli wall, the one side of the wall, the West Bank wall, over to the Israeli side, all of a sudden when you're in Israel, you see forests. I mean, they've imported pine trees into a desert and they're watering pine trees. But then they say they can't give water to the Palestinians. So you see this lush green forests and green grass and lots of vegetation going on the Israeli side in a desert. And over on the West Bank side, it is dry. It is, there's no water. They've got water storage tanks on all of their buildings. It's such a human rights abuse to limit access to water I can't even express it. And I will be bringing on, like I said, an expert to talk more in depth about it, because when you hear the full story about what is going on with the water, it is absolutely shocking. It is shocking. The wall, speaking of the wall, they've got this 300-mile long wall that goes all throughout the country. The country's only like the size of New Jersey. It's not a very big country. And the Israeli side of the wall is nice and finished. It has rocks, makes it look like it's, it's a finished wall. And on the Palestinian side of the wall, it looks like prison. It's ugly. It's gray, cement, barbed wire. It's terrible. On the Palestinian side of the wall, there's a lot of trash. Trash is everywhere. It's littered, trash. I mean, loads and loads of trash. And I'll show you footage of that also. And on the Israeli side, it's really nice and clean. And even inside of Israel, the Arab neighborhoods, so they've got mixed cities that are supposed to be mixed, but really they're segregated. And in those cities, the Arab neighborhoods are littered with trash. And the Israelis are responsible for the trash pickup in the West Bank and in obviously the Arab communities within Israel. And they often don't. They cite security. Security is always the thing they cite. They always say it's for security reasons. For security reasons, they couldn't import macaroni and tomato paste into Gaza. For security reasons, they couldn't give the university books on Chinese cooking. And it's real. That's what's going on. For security reasons, they're limiting. They won't let people dig wells to access water. For security reasons, all of these things happen for security reasons. So for security reasons, they can't come and pick up the trash. So they leave the Palestinians living in trash, and they leave the Palestinians without running water. So they're trying to make them dirty people so that people look at them and think, ooh, they're stinky, they're dirty, which was not my experience at all with Palestinians. They still were very clean, and despite everything that they're living under, they were making the best of their situation. Hebron is a whole video I will do on its own, because what's going on in that town in particular, that Palestinian town in the West Bank, is unbelievable. And if I told you, you wouldn't believe me, because it is unbelievable what is happening there. It is absolutely downright unbelievable. The Israeli settlers have hijacked the center of town. Could you imagine? Think of where you live right now and think of the busiest shopping center you've got. And imagine these Israeli settlers going in and hijacking it and forcing everybody out, or forcing them into their homes. If they live on that street, they're forced into their homes. They can't come out. They welded the doors shut so you couldn't use your own front door. They have hijacked the center of town. They've pushed everybody out. It is now a ghost town. And it was the creepiest thing walking through this area. We walked through it. I filmed it. I will be showing you some footage of it so you can understand just how horrible this situation is. But some reason the Israeli government has allowed these settlers to hijack the center of an Arab town. And there's about 100 or so Israeli settlers living there, and 1,000 soldiers guarding it, 1,000 military soldiers guarding it. So when you're walking through this ghost town, you see armored tanks and armed military people guarding this hijacked center of town. I mean, could you imagine some crazy group comes into your center of town and hijacks it, and then the US military comes and protects them rather than gets them the hell out of there? I mean, that's what's going on in Hebron. It was the creepiest, scariest thing. I didn't understand it. It's mind-blowing why the Israelis would continue to allow these settlers to live there and continue to allow them to have hijacked a center of town. But they do. They've got their reasons. They've got their excuses. I don't understand the excuses. I never wrap my mind around any of the excuses that I was given, except the excuses all sounded very racist. They sounded, and Bernie Sanders has recently called this out, saying that the Israeli government is racist. And I'm telling you, I saw racism like you cannot imagine over there. Blatant, in your face racism is going on over there. It's beyond imagination. Everything that I saw was beyond imagination. The identification system was outrageous. I don't know how they don't see the hypocrisy in that. The limiting of water is in that total human rights abuse. The hijacking of towns, the stealing of homes. When I was there for 1 week, I was there for 1 week. And in my little area of Ramallah where I was staying, there were 3 home demolitions in the zones surrounding Ramallah. 3 home demolitions in the 1 week I was there. There are reasons for home demolitions. They say it's because the person committed a crime like murder. So, for example, they say, well, that was a terrorist and that terrorist killed an Israeli soldier. And so even though that terrorist was killed themselves on site, because that's usually what happens, they're killed point blank. Or if they do go to trial, they're put in jail for life. But as another punitive punishment, they then not only put the person away for life, but then they take it out on the family by going to their family's home and demolishing it. So never mind the fact that their wife and children live there, or never mind the fact that their mother lives there or their siblings live there. I mean, could you imagine having to pay the price for your crazy sibling? Could you imagine like finding out that and they come and they take it out on you? That is not what we stand for here in America. We do not do that here, and they're doing that there. And they're thinking that that's okay. Another reason why they might demolish your home is because you don't have a permit to build it. So this is another one of the human rights abuses that's going on over there that is abhorrent. And it is that they're not allowing the Palestinians to expand. They're forcing them to build up and not out. So they build walls around their communities, or they put up basically military blockades. And areas B and C, the Israelis control the building permits. So they're not issuing building permits to Palestinians. Could you imagine in your town you live in, your urban town, you probably live in the suburbs because you have to expand out because it gets really expensive, because it gets congested in the city center, and you need it, and population increases. And so you've got to expand. This is normal, right? Well, what they've done is they've limited the Palestinians. They're not allowed to expand out. They have to stay in, and they have to build up. And you can see it when you're there. And I'll show you videos of this, but you'll see that they're starting to, they kind of set the foundations for building up when they build, because they know they have to build up. They can't build out. So they don't issue building permits to people, but they do to Israelis. They allow Israelis to build in the West Bank, but they're not allowing Palestinians to build in the West Bank. Not very many anyway. So if you're a Palestinian, you happen to build, you just say, screw it, I'm going to build. Because I'm not getting this permit, but we have to go somewhere. So you decide to build, they'll come and they'll demolish it. And they'll say, well, you didn't have a permit, but then they wouldn't give you the permit. And it's your own land. They're saying, no, you can't build there, but we'll let the Israelis come and build there. All in all, what I saw was, and there's just so much more. We went to refugee camps. We spoke to children. We spoke to doctors. One situation in particular, because they're hiding stuff. The Israelis are hiding things. When I was there, I had to make sure that I uploaded all of my footage to the cloud as I was filming it, because if an Israeli soldier stopped me and got my phone, they would erase it. That is something that I was told would happen. Now, I wasn't sure if that was real. Maybe that's an exaggeration. I was like, do they really erase footage? Do they really erase your photos? I don't know. That's what people say, but maybe that's fear mongering. No, it turns out it's real. I was sitting in the hotel lobby and I ran across some American doctors who had actually just done some work in Gaza. So they were in Gaza treating every Friday, the Palestinian Gazans, they get together and they protest. And most of them very peacefully, some throw rocks. And, the children get together and they're protesting. And the Israeli soldiers, according to these American doctors, who were these blonde, blue-eyed from like North Carolina doctors, and they were telling me that it was they were there to treat the children who get shot, that every Friday it's about 70 kids that get shot and maimed, and that these doctors can't even keep up with the incoming trauma patients. And they were saying that these are unarmed children. They're witnessing it. These are Americans that are witnessing this with their own eyes, and they're seeing what's happening, and they're saying these are unarmed kids. And they're coming in, they're being maimed, their arms are being blown off, their legs are being blown off, and some of them are even being killed. Well, I mentioned I would like to go into Gaza, which I would like to get in. If I can swing it, I will. But she says, well, would you like to see photographs? I said, yes, I want to see pics. So she starts looking through her computer, and I'm talking to her colleague who's also a doctor, and they're in the lobby. And about 10 minutes go by, and she looks at me and she says, I can't find the pictures. And she says, I think they erased the pictures. She says, I had to turn my computer over to the military when we were exiting Gaza, and I can't find the pictures. She's like, I've got pictures before and pictures after. And they allowed some of the pictures from Gaza, like pictures of her hotel room. But the other pictures that she had of Gaza were gone. And this was happening right in front of me. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to this doctor. She's trying to show me photographs, and the photographs are gone. And she's saying, I think the Israelis deleted the pictures. So you have to ask yourself, what are they hiding? What is going on that they want to delete photographs? What is going on that when we're over there and we're filming, we have to upload to the cloud, because if an Israeli soldier gets a hold of it, they're going to erase it. There was one moment when an Israeli soldier caught me when I was in Hebron, that crazy town that I'm going to show you the footage of, because I was able to get footage of it, because I hid a camera in my pocket. I put my cell phone in my pocket with the camera lens facing out, and I walked. So it's being edited right now because it's real choppy, because I'm walking with this camera in my pocket trying to show you what Hebron is like, because it was absolutely insane. And there was an Israeli soldier that caught me, and he pointed at my camera in my pocket. And I just played it cool, and I lifted it. Oh yeah, this is the new iPhone 11. Isn't it cool? And I quickly turned off the footage and, hope that it uploaded to the cloud and got out of there, and showed him my phone and acted, and try to play it cool so that they wouldn't then ask for the phone and actually take the images off the phone. So, I had one little close call, but the whole experience, all in all, in being there was unreal. I mean, while I was there, I just wasn't processing it. It took me coming home for me to start to really feel very upset and very shocked and disgusted. And I have to say that every American I've met, or any Westerner who has spent any amount of time in the West Bank or in Gaza, with the Palestinian people, spending time with Palestinians, sleeping in Palestine, eating with Palestinians, traveling with Palestinians. Every single person I know who has done this has walked away disgusted. Every single person. I have yet to meet a person who has not walked away from that experience without absolute disgust for the human rights abuses that are happening against these people. Because what is happening to them is a complete demoralization. They are being ripped of all hope. They are being forced to identify themselves and carry that identification everywhere they go. They're not given water. They're not given cleanliness. They're not given access to each other, to schools, to roads. They've got separate roads in the West Bank. They've got roads that are just for Israelis in the West Bank. Could you imagine they've built roads that are separated by a wall, and it's Israelis on this side and Palestinians on that side, going through the West Bank, which should be Palestine. They have just, the Palestinian people don't complain. This was the other thing that was really interesting about the trip, is you rarely hear them complaining. To them, these abuses are so normal that we as a delegation had to ask all these questions. We're like, what's with the tanks on the buildings? And then they were like, those are our water reserves. Well, why? Oh, well, because they shut off the water 4 days a week. What? I mean, these were the conversations. It wasn't Palestinians complaining to us. It wasn't them saying, let us tell you all the abuses that we're under. They weren't saying that at all. They were just like, here it is. This is life. This is life in Palestine. And us delegates were asking question after question after question, only to get answers that were horrifying. Only to get answers that were like, excuse me, what? I mean, how are they able to do this? Like, we met a woman who's married to a man, and she was going through that identification problem. She's not a Jerusalemite. Her husband's a Jerusalemite. She moved into Jerusalem. She's basically living there illegally. She's like, I just hope they don't catch me. But she's got kids living there, and her husband's there. And she's like living in the West Bank, which is technically a Palestinian side of Jerusalem. She's from only a few minutes away, and she's not really allowed to be there. And so she's just illegally living, because what else are they supposed to do? Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to be with their families. I can't even express the level. I mean, I really can't in words, the level of human rights abuses that I saw while I was over there. It was absolutely horrible and disgusting. And again, for my Jewish friends and my Palestinian and my Israeli friends, I ask you to hold off on the defense of what the Israeli government and what the military is doing to these people until you see it for yourself. Because I guarantee you, if you see it for yourself, if you see the amount of oppression these people are having to live under, if you see the abuses that are happening, the searches, I saw random searches happening of Arabs. I saw the gunshot wounds that the doctors were showing me photos of from Gaza. We spoke to members of the UN, Red Cross, mayor of Ramallah, members of the Knesset. We had a very extensive trip where we met with a variety of people that are in positions of power in Palestine, or powerlessness, I would say. We met with a variety of Palestinians, like I said, who were American Palestinians who migrated back, or who actually their parents were from there, and they were totally as American could be. I met one from Laguna Beach and one from Ohio. They're born and raised in these places, and they decided to go to Palestine to help build it up. And you meet these people, you meet Christians, you meet Muslims. We met Jewish Palestinians living in Palestine. It was an unbelievable experience. And I can say that Bernie Sanders has recently come out to condemn the Israeli government, the racist Israeli government, and the treatment of the Palestinian people. And I can tell you firsthand that it is much, much worse than any of us can express to you. It is much, much worse. It is beyond belief that westernized people can do this to another group of people, all under the name of security. They say it's security reasons. So for security reasons, you have to hinder people from visiting their ailing parents. For security reasons, I guess you have to make it to where people can't get water 4 days a week. So for security reasons, you have roads that are just for Israelis and roads that are just for Palestinians in the West Bank. Why are you even there if you're so concerned for your security? So there was just, now I know I am going to be hated on. I know that I'm going to be called an anti-Semite. Again, like I said, starting off with this video is I have more Jewish friends than I have Palestinian friends. I have no skin in the game. And so this is something that people must listen to. If you have no skin in the game and you go and you look and you say, what the hell is going on here? This is horrible. Then you have to stop and ask yourself, what the hell is going on here? Because it's horrendous. And we Americans are paying for it. We're paying for these abuses. We're funding that military and we're allowing them to go rogue, and they've gone rogue. It is, once again, the abused have become the abuser. And right now, what needs to happen is the Israelis need to be saved from themselves, because they're going down an extremely dark path. They are very much, it is very, very obvious what they're doing. And what they're doing has nothing to do with security. Some to do with security. I can't say nothing, because there are security concerns. They do need to be diligent about their security, because they are under attack. Just like the Palestinians are under attack from the Israelis. They're all under attack. And we could argue all day long whether or not Israel, like I said, at this point, Israel's there. So I think Israel has the right to exist. I do not think that Israel should be under Palestinian law or rule. The Palestinian people, I love them. I'm desperately wanting to go back to spend more time there. But they are a very conservative group of people. And I wouldn't want to impose conservative laws on a liberal group of people. It's not what I'm in here for. Just like I wouldn't want to force Californians to suddenly live under Alabama law. But I would like to see both of these groups of people be able to live side by side. I don't think that's possible. And the reason why I don't think that's possible is because it's really, really clear to me what the Israelis are doing. They are totally trying to eradicate the Palestinians from that land. They want to take the entire Holy Land, and they want the Holy Land to be the whole of Israel. And I don't know what they think they're going to do with all of these Palestinians, but it is very clear that they're making their lives absolutely miserable so that they maybe leave. Maybe they become refugees in Syria or Jordan or Lebanon or wherever they might go. But when you spend time there, you see that the excuse of security is not really it's not a legitimate claim, because they're just going way above and beyond. It's way more than security. It's just terrorizing these people to make their lives miserable. It's oppressing them and humiliating them and robbing them of hope. And they're raiding the university. Last month, I believe they went into Bizaret University and they arrested the student body president in the middle of the night. They're just terrorizing and they claim it's for security reasons. And I have no doubt that some of it is, but the majority of it just can't possibly be. I mean, it just can't. And the things that they're doing in Hebron and in these settlements and, dividing up the mosque after an Israeli settler goes into a mosque and shoots 29 people dead. And the response is to give the terrorist half. So that's the response. And that's what they've done. Now they've built a wall in this mosque and said, no, you have to share it because the guy came in and slaughtered you guys. So clearly he really wants it. So we're going to give it to him. That's the response. I mean, could you imagine if we would have done that to the Tree of Life synagogue? Could you imagine if we said, well, gosh, this guy is a real Christian zealot. He wants half that synagogue. I guess we're going to have to give him half because he came in there and he slaughtered you. So I guess we're going to have to build a wall and give the Christians half. That is what's happened in Hebron, and it is not okay. We saw a lot of intimidation going on from the settlers. We were at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the compound, and we saw about 200 Israeli settlers marching around armed with the military, with the Israeli military flanking them, protecting them, while they walked around this mosque. And those of us in the group, at first, we didn't really realize what was going on. It kind of took a day or two for us to process what had happened because we were new there. So we were kind of like, maybe this is normal. Maybe they're supposed to be here. We didn't know, right? We're foreigners in this foreign land, not knowing what's going on. And then it dawned on us after being there a couple of days that, wait a minute, there's no synagogue in that mosque compound. What were they doing there? And then I looked it up online and saw the news reports. And then I kicked myself that I didn't get any footage of it. But the news reports were that these Israeli settlers were going into this mosque area to intimidate the Muslims because they're really fighting over this land in Jerusalem, this Dome of the Rock area, the Temple Mount. They're really, really fighting over it. The Israelis would like to knock down the mosque or knock down the Dome of the Rock and build their temple, their third temple that, according to prophecy, is supposed to be built. And so they were just kind of marching around to intimidate, which, according to their religion, they're not even supposed to be there, actually. They're not supposed to step foot on the holiest place on earth, and that's considered the holiest place on earth. So they were just doing it, and they were flanked by the riot police. The guys in gray, the Israeli police in gray, are the riot police, and you got to watch out for them because they'll break your bones. The only time I felt afraid was of the Israeli soldiers. That was the only time I felt fear. That was the only time I felt like I was afraid. And that has been the sentiment of the other Americans I've spoken to who have gone there for other reasons. Friends of mine who have been there, who stayed in Ramallah like I did, who stayed with Palestinians, friends of mine who are Mormon, who are, they're not Jewish, they're not Muslim, they're Mormons. And they went over there and they said it was absolutely disgusting what they witnessed, and that the only time they felt fear was from the IDF. And that is exactly how I felt as well. So I struggled on whether or not I was going to talk about this so callously, I guess maybe, candidly, Freudian slip. And I struggled with it. I filmed this video several times over because I tried to be more neutral in my previous videos. I tried to not be so harsh on the Israelis for what they're doing. And morally and ethically, I could not do that because we have to stand up for what is right and wrong. And when we see something that is wrong, we have to stand up and say it is wrong, regardless of the consequences. And for me, there will be consequences. I live in Los Angeles. I've got a lot of Jewish friends, the entertainment industry, everybody here. In my life, as in my line of work that I was in, and I don't know what's going to happen to this channel or what the repercussions are. I don't even know if Israel will ever let me back in. I don't know what the repercussions are for speaking out. But all I know is when I thought about it and when I tried to make the more neutral videos, I couldn't post them because I knew I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Because ultimately, the truth has to be told. And the truth is, what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinian people is absolutely wrong. It is wrong, it is abhorrent, and it is beyond belief, and it needs to stop. And it doesn't matter what the political solution is. People say, well, we got to come to a solution. We got to come to some peace deal. No, we don't. We can end human rights abuses today. We do not need to wait for a political solution to end human rights abuses. That is bullshit. I demand that these human rights abuses end right now without a political solution. We don't need a political solution to end human rights abuses. We don't need to come to a one-state or two-state agreement. We don't need to have a peace deal. We don't need to have any of that. We need to end human rights abuses. There are 100 things that the Israelis could do today to make Palestinians' lives better, and they need to do that now. They need to end this horrid abuse of the Palestinian people. And it is not for security reasons. It is fear-mongering these people to eradicate them from Israel. And that is what they're trying to do. Make no mistake about it. I saw it with my own eyes. So, my Jewish and Israeli friends, I encourage you to please go and do a tour with the group. There's several different organizations out there that will take you around to see for your own self. But you definitely need to go and take part in one of those groups and tour around and see what they have to say. The rest of you who are not Jewish or Israeli, definitely also maybe you could do one of the same types of tours, or you can just go and visit Palestine and see what is going on there for yourself. I highly encourage it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll get into the political solutions, and I do think that it is harming them to call for a one-state solution and to continue for BDS, guys. I'm just going to tell you that I'm more against calling for these. I don't think it should be illegal. That is one step that they're going. That is way too far when it comes to making these boycotts illegal and protests illegal. That is absolute bullshit. But I will say that calling for a one-state solution and supporting protests or supporting movements that are calling for a one-state solution are only increasing the human rights abuses that are going on over there, because it's antagonizing to the Israelis. And so then they go harder at the Palestinians. And so I have to say that for the sake of their human rights, which is my number one concern right now, I'm not that concerned with the political solutions. At this point, I'm concerned with the human rights of the Palestinians, that we have to do what is best for them and their lives. And right now, anything that even sounds like it's calling for the end or demise of Israel is not going to help these people. It's only going to make their situation worse. So keep that in mind. I think when you see what's going on there, unless you're the type of person that thinks Israel should go away. And if you are that type, then you keep on keeping on. I don't think that, but if that, because they're there now, and people were born and raised there too, just like I was born and raised here and not in Vietnam. But that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother thing to get into at another time. I just wanted to kind of get this out there and discuss what I saw and put my thoughts out there. And so that I can, for one, I missed a lot of stuff going on here in America. I need to talk about the stuff that's going on here. So I'm going to kind of jump back into the game and be doing normal, your regularly scheduled programming. But I'm going to intersperse throughout these next month or two segments about the West Bank and about what I saw, and bringing on experts to talk more in depth about them. So I will be delivering more and the footage as time goes on. I just wanted to kind of get back in the game and get this out there and make myself heard as to what I saw. All right, guys. So this was an hour. It's a long one. Thank you for sticking around and watching. And I appreciate your support, or I appreciate your criticisms. I mean, if you are critical of what I've had to say, I'm happy to hear from you. I am happy to hear from Americans or anyone who has actually spent time in the West Bank who came away thinking the opposite of me. I don't know if I'll meet that person, but I would like to meet them if you exist so that we can have a conversation. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for your time. And I'll be back with regularly scheduled programming tomorrow. Bye, guys.